falling in love with you.
I used to believe nothing could stop Elvis Presley once he hit the stage. But that night, I saw him freeze, not from forgetting the lyrics, not from exhaustion, but because of something none of us expected, a whisper from a dying child. I was there. Midsouth Coliseum, September 15th, year 1975. Memphis was on fire that night, not from flames, but from people. Nearly 18,000 fans packed into an arena built for 12. Nobody complained, because we all knew we were about to see the king of rock and roll in the flesh. Elvis came out in a white sequined jumpsuit, and the place exploded. Lights poured down like heaven had split open. I still remember the blood in my veins buzzing when Burning Love kicked in. That wasn't a concert. That was lightning bottled and let loose. Nobody thought that show would stop. But then, it did. Right in the middle of Can't Help Falling in Love. A woman's voice rose above the music, trembling. Desperate Elvis. Please, my son is dying. He loves you so much. The Coliseum froze. The lights stuttered. Elvis stood still. He let go of the microphone like it had just burned him. One mother, lost in a sea of 18,000, had given up fear to call out a last hope for her child, who was slipping through her fingers. Nobody dared to breathe. Then Elvis stepped to the edge of the stage, shielding his eyes, and spoke. "What's your son's name?" "Mom, Danny Sullivan. He's 7. The doctors say he won't make it through the night. All he wanted was to hear you sing." Elvis. That response hit like a thunderclap. Our eyes weren't on Elvis anymore. They were on a frail little boy in an oversized Elvis shirt, wearing a baseball cap, resting limply in his mother's arms. And then Elvis said the words, "I will take with me to my grave. Tonight the show stops. Because something matters more." I don't remember exactly which way Elvis left the stage. I only remember this, after he said, "The show stops tonight." He turned his back to us and walked into a silence that swallowed the entire arena. The band froze. The lights dimmed into a soft amber. No one moved. No one left. It felt like we had crossed into another realm where time stood still, and hearts beat cautiously, almost fearfully. I later heard that within minutes, the backstage door opened, and Elvis held the boy named Danny in his own arms. One of the crew members recalled Elvis wasn't surrounded by handlers or security. There were no stage lights. No urgency. Just a man, hands trembling, not from fear, but because he knew he was about to sing for someone's final moment on earth. Danny was laid down on a long makeup bench in the dressing room. So small, so pale. A baseball cap hid his bare scalp. He wore an oversized t-shirt that read Elvis Fan Club. It hung off his shoulders like a borrowed blanket. Elvis sat down beside him. I was told he didn't say much, just held the boy's hand, gently, like holding onto a fragile thread in a storm. "You're Danny." "Right." The boy nodded faintly. "Your mama said you like Love Me Tender." Danny couldn't say much, but his eyes brightened. And then, he whispered, "It helps me not be scared." Elvis looked at him, not with his eyes, but with a kind of knowing, the kind only a man who had lost everything can possess. He knew pain, loneliness, the hollow silence after applause fades. And in Danny's trembling hand, he saw himself. Elvis leaned down, kissed Danny's forehead, and pulled his chair closer. No microphone, no sound system, just a voice soft as warm cloth, rising gently inside a room, so still it felt sacred. "Love me tender, love me sweet." Each line came slower, softer, as if Elvis wasn't just singing, he was wrapping a soul in lullabies. keeping it warm for just a little longer. Someone said Margaret, Danny's mother, had dropped to her knees in the corner of the room, not praying, just grateful. She didn't need a miracle anymore, because in that moment, her son just once had been sung to, not as a fan, but as the only person in the universe. And the most extraordinary thing happened. Danny smiled, the first real smile in months after chemo, IV drips, night sweats, and pain. A smile with no sound, but a smile that made every person in that room cry without shame. He didn't need more time, because in those few minutes, he had already lived enough. I've never seen stage lights fall so gently. When Elvis returned, not alone, but carrying little Danny in his arms, the entire arena held its breath. All sounds vanished. No applause, no cheers. Only a sacred hush draped over us, as if every heart was bowing. Danny rested in his arms, weightless. His bare scalp leaned against the shoulder of a man who had made millions cry with his music. Yet tonight looked like a father carrying his child to sleep. Elvis stepped up to the microphone, his voice cracked, low and trembling. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Danny Sullivan. He is 7 years old, and he is a warrior none of us can even imagine." No one said a word. A few quiet sobs rippled through the crowd. Elvis sat gently at the piano, still holding Danny close. He placed shaking fingers on the keys and began to play "Love Me Tender" again, this time. Not just with his voice, but with a heart breaking wide open. And then Danny sang along, faint, fragile, but the words left his tiny lips like a miracle. "Love me tender, love me true." I couldn't believe my ears. That boy, the one doctors said wouldn't make it through the night, was singing. And then something even more unthinkable happened. All 18,000 people began to sing too, not in harmony, not rehearsed, but like a collective lullaby, sent to one small soul, slipping away, filled with all the love humanity could gather in a single breath. In that moment, I realized Elvis was no longer Elvis. Danny was no longer a patient, and we, the audience, were no longer strangers. We were one. As the song ended, Elvis pulled Danny close, whispered something no one else heard, but Danny smiled, a smile so bright. I swear, even the stars bowed that night. And then Danny removed his cap and placed it gently on Elvis's head. He whispered, "So you'll remember me." And the king of rock and roll, a man known for never letting anyone touch his slicked back hair, wept. After that night, I never looked at concerts the same way again. Elvis continued the rest of the show with Danny's tiny baseball cap still on his head. He didn't take it off. He didn't explain it. And with each song that followed, it felt like he wasn't singing just for Danny, but for every child and every adult quietly fighting their unseen battles. The arena didn't feel like a concert anymore. It felt like a ceremony, a sacred gathering where music no longer existed to entertain, but to heal. When the show ended, Elvis didn't rush off stage. Instead, he returned backstage and sat with the Sullivan family for nearly an hour. No cameras, no press, no spectacle. Just a man, not a superstar, but a father, a brother, a friend spending quiet, holy time with a boy he had only just met. Elvis gave Danny one of his iconic white stage scarves, the kind fans would scream and reach for. But that night, he didn't throw it. He gently draped it across Danny's chest and whispered, "This scarf used to fly in the wind, but now it will stay to keep you warm." Danny held onto that scarf until the very end. And here's the miracle no one saw coming. He didn't die that night. Not the next day. Not even the next week. He lived for 6 more months. Doctors called it medically inexplicable, but his mother, Margaret said, "I think some medicine doesn't come from hospitals. It comes from love, from music, from the feeling that you've been seen and held." During those 6 months, Danny attended 2 more Elvis concerts. Each time, Elvis would nod toward the front row and smile. The crowd never knew what it meant. But Danny knew, and he always wore the same cap Elvis had worn that night. He passed away in March, year 1976. On him still rested the white scarf. 6 months after that unforgettable night, Elvis stepped onto the stage in Las Vegas. I watched the video of that performance years later. What caught my eye wasn't the voice. It wasn't the jumpsuit. It was a small, worn-out cap placed gently next to the piano. No one mentioned it. No one asked. But I knew. I recognized it instantly. It was Danny's cap. They say Elvis changed after that night at the Midsouth Coliseum. He was still the king of rock and roll, still lit up every stage he touched. But something was different. He began to pause longer when he saw a child in the audience. He started noticing tired faces in the back row. He sang slower during the chorus, as if he was waiting for someone to catch up to the rhythm of his heart. Charlie Hodge, Elvis's best friend and guitarist, once said, after Danny, Elvis stopped performing for applause. He started performing so people wouldn't feel alone. When Elvis passed away in August, year 1977, they cleaned out his bedroom at Graceland. In the top drawer of his nightstand, not among medals, jewelry, or awards, they found a faded little cap, a white scarf, and a few handwritten letters from the Sullivan family. And beneath it all, a simple note in Danny's handwriting: "I'm not afraid anymore. I got to hear an angel sing." Danny. The world may remember Elvis for his fame, for the chart-topping hits, for the sold-out stadiums. But I'll remember him for the night he stopped a show to listen to a whisper from the 3rd row, and for wearing a little boy's cap to remind himself and the rest of us that sometimes the smallest thing is the most meaningful moment in a person's life. It's been nearly 50 years since that night, but whenever I think of Elvis wearing Danny's little cap, eyes full of tears, my heart still tightens, as if I was seeing it for the very first time. Not because I was the biggest Elvis fan, not because the music was perfect that night, but because I watched a man pause his own spotlight to hold on to the fading light of a little boy's life. I cried that night, and even now, as I share this story with you, I still can't hold back the tears. And I wonder, have you ever felt something like this? A small moment, but one that made you believe that human kindness still exists, even in a chaotic world. If this story touched you even just a little, please leave a comment below, so I know I'm not the only one who carried this memory for a lifetime.